So your concern was both for her, but also for the baby.
Yeah. And I remember at some point I just kind of asked, I asked one of the officers that was standing there, is she going to be okay? And he's kind of looked at me and said, she's dead, but we're going to get her body to the hospital and save the baby. And I'm just kind of like, what?
Welcome to Stories of Hope in Hard Times, the show that explores how people endure and even thrive in difficult times, all with God's help. I'm your host, Tamara K. Anderson. Join me on a journey to find inspiring stories of hope and wisdom learned in life's hardest moments.
My guest today is a relationship coach and the expert on widower relationships. As a remarried widower, he has successfully helped thousands of widowers and the women who date them know if they're ready to open their hearts to a new relationship. He is the author of 7 books, 4 widower relationship guides, 2 novels, and a memoir about losing his late wife to suicide and falling in love again. He is also an avid runner. He and his wife, Juliana, live in the beautiful state of Utah and as citizens of the Beehive State are parents of the requisite 7 children. I am pleased to introduce Abel Keogh. Abel, are you ready to share your story of hope?
Yes, I am ready.
Awesome. So you say you're an avid runner. When did that start?
That started actually 19 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, it was 2000, and I was kind of fat and overweight, and I got tired of it, so I just started running, and I haven't stopped.
So I have to ask, as a person who's never enjoyed running, what is it that you enjoy about running?
I think it's a mental thing at this point. It's something about just going out there and releasing energy, and it wakes me up, it gets me going. It's basically the first thing I do in the morning. So I'm up and I'm putting on the running shoes and I'm out the door. It just makes me think better. I would say it's not just running. I think anyone in any kind of exercise. So if you don't like running, it's fine. I know people that go biking or lift weights or do something like that. It's just that same kind of thing. I think it's putting your body and your mind in the place that it needs to be to start the day. At least that's how it is with me.
That is awesome. So we're going to dive back into your story a little bit. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your wife, Krista?
I married my wife, Krista, on a cold, freezing day in December 1998.
Uh-huh.
And, I don't remember being cold, but everybody else says it was really cold that day.
You're probably too happy and smiling to remember the cold.
So I remember the day really good. And we had known each other for a long time. We kind of grew up together, but really didn't start dating until we were both in college and just kind of hit things off. And we got married and started a wonderful life together.
Wonderful. Now, you talk in your book, Room for Two, that you noticed that things began to change with her when you found out you were expecting a baby. Why don't you talk me through that? We
found out she was expecting, I want to say about May or June of 2001. Everybody was happy. Everybody was excited. And, we were excited to be parents. But as the pregnancy progressed, her attitude and her mood changed. If you know Krista, she was this person who was always happy. She was, very vivacious, very outgoing. If she was in a room with you in 60 seconds, you'd feel like she was your best friend. I mean, that's just the kind of personality she had.
Mm-hmm.
Always positive, always upbeat. And then I'd say probably maybe 4 months into it, things really just slowly started to change. She wasn't as happy. She became a little more sad and just kind of depressed about just everything. It wasn't just like one thing. It was just life in general.
Mm. And how did this affect your marriage?
It was really hard. So I had an hour-long commute at the time. And so, I'd leave early, I'd go to work, and I'd come back, and, it was basically 10 hours from the time I left, and I'd just come home. And sometimes she wasn't even home. Sometimes she had gone to her grandmother's place or something like that. And, it was just this... It was really tough because I didn't know what was going on with her, and it was weird because I'd bring it up at work, right? And I'd say like somebody would say, hey, how's your wife doing? How's the pregnancy doing? And I'd say, oh, she's acting really weird, she's just not herself, and they'd kind of laugh it off and say, well, my wife was all weird when she was pregnant too, so I was just assuming it was. I don't know, this is how women were when they're pregnant. I didn't have any context for this. And so I thought, I can't wait till she has the baby.
Right.
I was like, okay, I can just hold on until she has the baby, and then things will get better, kind of thing. That was kind of my attitude at the time, and I just kind of figured if I could just kind of push through it, she'd have the baby and we'd go back to normal.
Right, right. And then in one day, everything changed.
Yeah, so we had spent the night at her grandmother's house, and we had just moved into a new apartment. It was probably a 20-minute drive away, and so I got up early, and there's just some errands that needed to be done, and I knew that she really didn't want to run errands, so I just kind of told her, I'm going to go run these errands. I'll come back in a couple hours, and let's pack up our stuff and go to the apartment for the rest of the day. And she kind of agreed to that. And so I went and ran the errands and came back, 2 hours later or so, and she was gone and she wasn't there. And I just kind of instinctively knew she was at our apartment, which I thought was weird because I thought we had agreed to, kind of go over together. And so I kept calling, and at first she answered the phone. And, I was like, hey, and she kept telling me not to come over. It was just kind of like these really weird conversations. And at some point it turned into a fight where we were just kind of yelling at each other and, kind of slammed down the phone and said, well, I'm coming over, and slammed down the phone and started heading over to the apartment.
Yeah. Wow. So you weren't sure if she was going to be happy to see you or unhappy to see you.
Again, it was just weird behavior. It's like, well, why are you there? And, and why do you not want me to come over? And so anyway, I drove to the apartment. And as soon as I arrived at the apartment, I just had this feeling that something was wrong. Like it's the middle of the day. It's 1, 2 in the afternoon. The blinds are drawn. There's no lights on. It's just something's just not right. But I could see her car kind of parked off to the side. And so anyway, I kind of tried to calm down a little bit. I was fuming at the whole drive over there. I'm just fuming. I'm just mad. And I try to calm down a little bit. So hopefully we're not going to fight as soon as I get in the apartment. And I kind of, I opened the door to the apartment, and dark and quiet. There's nothing, it's very weird. And I call out her name, and that's when I hear a gunshot from the bedroom.
Oh my gosh. What was going through your mind when you heard that gunshot?
I was thinking, I just didn't know what I was just stunned. I was like, did I just hear what I thought I heard,
Right.
and I raced back there, and, she had shot herself.
Oh my gosh. So I'm sure the next little while was probably a blur. Called 911.
Yeah, I called 911. Again, I don't know how long, but it seemed pretty quick. There was police there, and paramedics there, and everybody else, and they kicked me out of the room. And then there's a whole apartment was filled with emergency first responder kind of people. And
Right. And at some point, I know in your book you mentioned that you were telling them that she was pregnant.
Yeah,
right?
She was 7 months pregnant.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So your concern was both for her, but also for the baby.
Yeah. And I remember at some point I just kind of asked, again, I don't know how much time had passed here. I think it was fairly quick though. I kind of asked if she was going to be okay. And I asked one of the officers that was standing there, is she going to be okay? And he's kind of looked at me and said, she's dead, but we're going to try to get her and save the baby, to get her body to the hospital and save the baby. And I'm just kind of like, what? I just don't, again, it's just, I don't quite understand what's going on. And then, and then a few minutes later, her body's gone, and, I'm just kind of there in the apartment alone with a couple of police officers. Wow.
My goodness. Walk me through the next few days for you. What was that like?
So, I think I was, nothing seemed real to me. It seemed like I was kind of, I don't know, people talk about experiences where they feel like they're watching their own life, kind of go on. And that's kind of what it was. I just felt like, this wasn't really real. This was all just some kind of movie or something like that. But a lot of my time and attention at this point was focused on our daughter, Hope, where I was, I got to see her soon after she was delivered, I guess is the right word. And then they flew her over to Primary Children's Hospital. And, at that point, it was just going down and seeing her every day. So that was kind of my, that was pretty much the time after that. It was spending all the time at the hospital. So there really wasn't a lot of time to process or really think about what was going on. As though I'd get up early, go to the hospital, stay there till late, come home, and I was go back to my parents' house is where I was staying. And it was just, I don't know, that was life for about the next 9 days.
Wow, my goodness. And tell us about your sweet baby Hope.
So Hope was a beautiful baby. She was very small, though. I remember the first time I saw her. I think that's the first time I'd actually seen a premature kind of baby thing, and I was just surprised. I mean, she looked like a baby. Had the 5 fingers or the 10 fingers, 10 toes. Fully developed, but just small. And she did look like Krista, though. Her face looked just like Krista, but she had a mop of brown hair like I have instead of the blonde hair that Krista had. But pretty much like a small thing of Krista, but I just remember thinking how small she was, and just kind of hoping and praying that she would survive.
Yeah. And what did the doctors talk you through while you were at the hospital then?
So pretty much from the get-go, the doctors weren't very optimistic about her chances of survival. She had been deprived of oxygen for a while while they got, from the time Krista died till they got her to the hospital. And so there was a lot of brain damage or blood on the brain, I guess is what it was, and we went through a series of X-rays and stuff, and they were just kind of they were not optimistic that anything was going to happen. I think they tried to be very gentle about it, but they were kind of like, we don't think she's going to survive. And I think after a while, after about a week, it became pretty apparent to me that if she was going to survive, it was only going to be with the hope of life support. It wasn't going to be, she wasn't going to pull out of this.
Right. Oh my goodness. So you were reeling from your wife's death, and now you're dealing with the possibility of your sweet baby's death. You talk in your book about having to make that decision and how it was so different than watching it in movies of people, making that decision. Talk me through what you were thinking at that time.
I think it was, it was the hardest decision I've ever made. Even though I knew it was the right thing to do, it was still hard.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think at some level I felt it was the right thing to do, but it was just, I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, I just kind of realized that it wasn't really a life she was going to have if she was hooked up to machines the entire time. If a machine's helping you breathe, if a machine's, if you got to be basically monitored 24/7 in order to survive, that to me, that wasn't a life. And so, I guess it came down to that she could have a better life in the next life. And so that's kind of what it came down to.
Yeah, I remember reading your book about this decision, and just my heart was just broken as you had to make this decision about your sweet baby Hope. And you also described praying about the decision.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't you talk me through that experience?
Yeah, I think it was probably the first time I'd actually prayed since Krista died, actually, because I was just, I don't know, so much going on and just a million different feelings going through. I just, I had to, I prayed about it, and I just had this, I don't know, I guess a peaceful feeling, I guess you could describe it as, just a feeling that, that this is something that it was okay to do.
Mm.
And so I guess enough comfort there for me to feel like that, even though, again, it was a hard decision and it was just a decision I didn't want to make, but again, it was the right decision and it was probably the best for her.
Yeah. And gosh, just trusting God with that. Holy cow. Very, very challenging, very, very difficult. Talk to me about the next few months of recovery after, and the grief that you were going through.
Yeah, I think those were, I hated it.
Yeah.
That's, describe it. It was awful because I felt like I had lost everything. I mean, at least anything that was really important. I mean, I still had my job, and they were very patient with me at my job because, I was just kind of out of it for a while. But, I had my job, but it was like, I didn't have anything else. I mean, I still had my family. I still had, my mom and my dad and brothers and sisters and stuff, but it was just different. It was, now I was going home and it was just me, and it was awful and I hated it. And it was, I don't know. I'd wake up in the morning, and the hardest part of there were two hard parts of the day. One was getting up in the morning, one was going to bed at night. And I'd wake up in the morning and I would stare at the ceiling, and I would just kind of have to talk myself out of bed, because I knew it would be really easy to stay in bed and, whatever, call in sick or whatever I wanted to do at work. But I had to talk myself out of bed every morning. And I'd already been running before this. I'd been running for maybe a little over a year before this happened. But I would just talk myself out of bed every morning, and realize that if I didn't, and at some level, some kind of internal level, I knew that if I didn't get out of bed, I was in trouble. And I knew that if I wasn't doing something and trying to keep myself busy, that I was going to be in some, I don't know, depressed or something. But I knew it was a really dark path, and so I would force myself out of bed every morning and I would go running. But sometimes it was this conversation I'd have with myself. I'd stare at the ceilings, like, get out of bed. I don't want to get out of bed. Get out of bed. I'm not getting out of bed. And I'd kind of have this, sometimes it would go on for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'd finally get out of bed and go run and stuff like that. And then the other hard time was just going to bed, because, again, it's like if I was lying there in bed, all I was dwelling on was sad things and depressing things, and so I was doing stuff like I was watching way too much TV. I was doing as much stuff as I could after I got home, just to exhaust me mentally. So by the time I went to bed, it was like I would fall right asleep. Right. And so it was this game that I would play with myself. Get up in the morning and then go through. I'd go through work and everything fine, but then the last couple hours of the day would be, I guess if it was today, I'd be playing on my phone for hours and hours on end, just to get something to distract me. But I was watching TV, and then just until I was seriously mentally exhausted, where I couldn't keep my eyes open, and then I'd go to bed. So that was kind of my life for maybe 3 months after Krista died.
Wow. Is that advice that you share now with others who are struggling with grief after the death of a loved one, to maybe try to keep yourself busy and do normal things like running?
Yeah.
What do you say to people?
I tell them to keep busy and to come up with some kind of routine. That's really the best thing that they can do, because I think anyone who's lost like a spouse or a child will just tell you that the worst thing you can do is do nothing. Anyone who's kind of pulled themselves out of it, they'll all say the worst thing you can do is do nothing. So, I advise, when I talk like to widowers who are trying to figure it out, I'm telling them, well, let's go through, what are some things that you can do in the morning? Well, I'm not doing anything. Okay, well, what's something you can be doing in the morning, right? And, a lot of it depends on their age and circumstances. It's a little bit easier if they have a job to go to, but sometimes I'll talk to older people who maybe don't have a job, right? And it's like, well, what am I going to do? They have less of a reason to get up and get going. And so it's coming up with those it's really kind of coming up with a schedule. It's kind of like being a kid again, in the sense how your parents kind of give you a schedule, like lunch is at this time, and then it's nap time, and then you're going to do all this stuff. It's the same kind of principle, just kind of really structuring your life. And I think, and really the advantage of that is really kind of, I don't know if it really gives your life a purpose again, but it just gives you something to look forward to, little chunks to look forward to. Okay, now I'm going to do this. It's Wednesday night, so whatever. There's a civic group I'm part of, and they have a meeting at 7:00. I'm going to go to that, or whatever. I have dinner at this time, or I'm doing this, and so it's just to give you those little kind of baby steps, so you can kind of make it through to the end of the day, and then you get back to the beginning the next day and you start over. That's really kind of the purpose of coming up with some kind of schedule.
That makes sense, and it also, in a way, if you pause and think about it, if you have a calendar, something on the calendar, it's one less decision you kind of have to make. Because you're like, okay, that's already there. And you don't have to make the decision, well, what am I going to do today? Because it's already there, right?
Yeah. So it's like you can wake up and, okay, here's the 5 things I've got to do today, right? It's whatever. It's Thursday. I'm going to go shopping for groceries. This is the time that I do it. So it's finding, just kind of, again, a routine like that. And again, if you can find a routine, that's not going to solve your problems, in the sense it's going to make you happy, but it kind of stops you from spiraling down any deeper is really what it does. So you're just kind of floating at that point. But I think, it takes some time to kind of process and kind of move through things. And so as long as you have a schedule, and again, I think the hardest time for me was weekends, because, I didn't have the job, right? So it was like Saturday morning I'd wake up and it's like, I don't have a job to go to. So, I'd get up and do longer runs, but still, I'd be done at whatever, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I've got 12, 14 hours to kill. It's like, what am I going to do? So it was, so actually I packed my Saturdays with a lot of errands, I would, whatever, shopping and gotta get the oil changed or whatever it was that I had to do, I would just pack it up with as many errands as I could.
Yeah. So let me ask you, you were doing these things to keep your mind off a lot of the things. What type of things were you doing to help heal your soul from all of this?
Well, I was going to church and I think part of the reason I went, I know you talk to a lot of widowed people and they'll kind of, maybe if they were regular churchgoers, they'll kind of stop a little bit. And I think part of the reason I went was going back to that schedule thing, right? It was something to do on Sunday mornings, right? Even if I felt like I really didn't belong there, or I felt like maybe I shouldn't be there for various reasons. I think it was a schedule thing for part of it. But at the same time, I think there was part of me that felt that if I was ever going to find any peace or any answers, it wasn't going to be lying in bed doing nothing, it wasn't going to be staying at home, that maybe if I was fortunate, maybe I'd find some kind of answers there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned that you weren't sure that you belonged, and there were several other things going through your head. What was going through your head as far as the argument against going to church?
I didn't feel, I guess, for lack of a better term, I didn't feel like I was worthy to be there.
And why is that?
Because I had ignored certain promptings or feelings before in the 24 hours leading up to Krista's death. I had ignored certain promptings and feelings, and I felt that if I had followed those feelings, that she wouldn't be dead, and so that I just wasn't worthy to be there because God or whatever had tried to maybe change that path, and I had just kind of ignored it. And so I just, it was that feeling of not being worthy or not feeling like that I deserved to be there.
Did you ever approach God and talk to him about those feelings and ask him if he still loved you?
Eventually. It took a long time. It took a long time, I think, because again, it was just, I just felt like, it's, I don't know, I guess the best way I can describe it, it's like, if you have kids and that, and your kids know that they've done something that has disappointed you, right? And they know it. I guess I felt like that kid, It was like, yeah, you told me not to do this and I did it anyway. But I think you think of that, of that kid, if it's your kid that's done it, you still love your kid. You still love your kid, right? Maybe you're disappointed in him, but you still love him. And so, I guess that's really what it was. It was that feeling of feeling like I disappointed somebody, and I don't know, but maybe not. Maybe I didn't quite have the whole parent aspect at the time. I really, even though I was kind of a dad technically, Hope really hadn't disappointed me or anything. But I think if something like that happened now, I'd have a different perspective because I have kids.
Yeah.
And there's been times where they know they've disappointed me, and I still want to wrap my arms around them and tell them that I love them. If I had that perspective 18 years ago, maybe I would have come through it a little bit better, or maybe not have been so distant. But because I didn't have that real perspective, I just felt like, I'd blown it, and I'm just coming to church even though I probably shouldn't be here anyway.
Yeah, but this helps us understand, especially if we have loved ones who are struggling with a similar situation, know what's going on in their head without having to ask them. And just you sharing your story is so beautiful and so powerful. So when were you finally able to pray and talk to God about all that?
I think it actually came, of all things, it came after I started dating again and falling in love again.
Really?
That's really when I really felt that I could do it. And it really came because, again, had certain promptings, about somebody that was going to church, and, to ask them out and to take some steps with them. And I think once I kind of put the pieces together and realized that, that even though I had made a mistake, even though perhaps I felt unworthy of God's love, that He was still willing to guide me and direct me. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I kind of realized that, hey, like, I don't know, maybe He's going to give me a second chance, just in general, that I wasn't that far gone, so to speak. And so, so by doing certain things, by putting promptings in my way, that, I was able to actually fall in love again and do things. But again, just that realization that He was still going to talk to me and care about me. I think that's what really turned it for me.
That's interesting. So would your advice then be to people who are going through something similar that God still loves you?
Yeah. God does love you, and even if you don't feel it or maybe don't think He does, He does. And I think it's just trying to reach a point in your life where you can maybe open your mind up to it, or open your heart up to it, because it's not Him that's it's putting those roadblocks up. It's us. It's me. Right? Mm-hmm. It was me that was putting those roadblocks up. And I think if I had maybe not been, I don't know if prideful is the right word, but
right.
But maybe if I had just kind of humbled myself a little bit more and realized that I was still valued and I was still loved, that instead of thinking that I was not, then maybe I would have realized that earlier.
So maybe just being more gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
And realizing, shoot, we all make mistakes. Some of them are bigger than others, but to give yourself a little grace, a little mercy, if you're feeling all this guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's actually really, really good advice. We're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, would you mind talking to us about falling in love again and the advice that you now give to other widowers?
I'd love to.
How many of you out there feel like your life is chaotic, crazy, and completely awful compared to the norm? What if I were to tell you that you are normal for you? I am so excited to announce that my book, Normal for Me by Tamara K. Anderson, is now available for purchase on Amazon. This book took me 10 years to write, and I share 20 years worth of lessons learned in my life detours, including being in a car accident and having 2 of my children diagnosed on the autism spectrum. In this book, I share the secrets of how I made it from despair to peace with God's help. I also include a bonus diagnosis survival guide at the very end of my Normal for Me book. The Diagnosis Survival Guide includes 12 tips to survive and thrive in tough times. Wouldn't you like to know what those are? So what are you waiting for? Grab your copy of Normal for Me today on Amazon.
And we're back. I'm interviewing Abel Keogh about losing his wife, Krista, and his baby, Hope, and then falling in love again. So, Abel, tell me about meeting your wife, Juliana, and how this plays into your role as a widower coach now.
Yeah, so I met Juliana at church, the very place I didn't want to be. So, but yeah, we were in kind of the church we attended was very family centric, mostly married couples or even maybe some empty nesters, and then there was me. Uh-huh. So there's another reason I really didn't feel like I fit in. Mm-hmm. But at some point, I noticed there was this woman about my age who seemed to be sitting by herself, and I remember like once she kind of walked past me. I was sitting on the back row there, and she walked past me, and I just kind of felt this real electric feeling as she passed. And I remember asking the person next to me, he's like, "Do you know who that is?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's Juliana." And he kind of told me a little bit about her. And So I started keeping my eye on her a little bit. I was thinking like, well, she's beautiful. And, she was a college graduate. She had her own job. I'm thinking like, man, she sounds pretty successful. And I'm thinking like, there's no way she doesn't have a boyfriend. She has to have a boyfriend. So I played this like watching game, I want to say for at least probably a month and a half, 2 months, where I would just kind of watch. I'd see if she'd come to church every Sunday, and she would. And she'd usually sit by herself. And, I was looking, did she have a wedding ring on her hand? Did she come with anybody? And she never came with anybody. Didn't see a ring. And finally, I was like, I've got to find a way to ask her out.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of a little scared and nervous because, I only lost my wife like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
How is this going to go? How is this going to play out?
Yeah.
And, but anyway, so something I would call a miracle happened. So one Sunday it was weird. We talked earlier about how I had to fill the void. Find things to do. And on Sunday mornings for church, she was all I could think about. It was really weird. It was all I could do was think about her. And is she going to come to church? Is she going to bring anybody with her? Is she going to have a ring on her finger this time? It was just I kept trying to think. This is going to be trying to find any reason I could not to, even though I wanted to really ask her out, not to ask her out, And so, anyway, I went out to the front porch and got the paper and went straight to the sports page. And there's her picture right on the front of the sports page.
Really?
Yeah, and she had just won the previous day. She had won the Ogden Marathon, and I'm just like, it was just one of those experiences. Like, no, that's not her. This can't be her. And I'm like, nope, that's her. And then I read the little caption on the photo, and it says, Juliana Taylor is whatever crosses the finish line at the Ogden Marathon, and I'm like, that even makes her more amazing than she already was in my mind. She had just won a marathon, but it gave me an idea. And I was like, I like to run. And I'm putting run in air quotes here compared to what she was doing. But I thought, well, maybe what I can do on a first date is I can ask her out and we can go running together after work one day. So so that Sunday I got up the courage. I was like, okay, I don't have any excuse at this point.
God literally handed you the paper with her picture on it with the idea, right?
Yeah. So I was like, so I went and we had a conversation. I said, hey, I congratulated her on running the marathon. She kind of turned red and she's very determined, but at the same time, she's very kind of private and shy, and she didn't like the idea of everybody knowing that she had won this race or something like that. And but I congratulated on her and I said, hey, well, I run too. Would you like to go running one day? And she's like, okay, sure. Yeah, we can go running. And so we planned a date for that Friday where she'd come over to my house and I don't know, we'd run like 4 miles. And that was the beginning of our first date.
Well, there you go. That's awesome. So you got up the nerve and you finally asked her. So this is actually good for us to know that widowers, it takes a lot of courage to ask somebody out after.
Yeah, we have a lot of doubts, especially, so most widowers will start dating within the first year. And most of the time, it's a lot sooner than that. I mean, it's within weeks or 2-3 months, they're out dating again. And I actually wanted to date earlier, like 2 or 3 months after Krista died. I had this desire to date again. And I kept telling myself, what's wrong with you? You're just mad at her. I kind of kept talking myself out of it. So it was about 5 months after she died that I actually started going online and, dating again and having all those awkward moments that people have when they date again. So I think one of the things that they, that they're worried about and rightfully worried about is just, my wife's only been dead. In my case, it was like 6 months. Why are you, why are you dating again? Why are you, did you not love your wife? You can think all these questions that are going through people's heads. And the reality is that honestly, it's just the way men are wired. They're just wired to go out there and date again. Now that causes problems because most of them are dating before they're really emotionally ready for a committed relationship. But, when I talk to widowers, I say, look, if you want to date, go date. There's nothing wrong with that. But I just kind of advise them not to get into a serious relationship. I tell them to go out, however you're meeting people. If you want to do it the easy way, just go online. But, go out with 3 or 4 different women over a period of 3, 4, 5 weeks. It's just so you can kind of reorient to, to dating again. Because odds are it's changed a lot since, since you dated your wife and were engaged to your wife. It's changed a lot, not only with technology, but just, what people are expecting. So I say, just go out on, 3 or 4 different dates. Don't have any expectation of any kind of commitment or anything like that. Just go out, and the whole purpose of this is for you to decide, is this something you really want to do? And also it exposes you to a bunch of different personalities and different people, because right now the perfect woman in your head is your late wife.
Right.
And though she was wonderful and perfect, you can't compare these other people to her. You got to realize they're individuals, and you've got to learn that there's a broad set of personalities and interests out there that you haven't been exposed to, or not, in a dating scene anyway, you haven't been exposed to. And the best thing you can do is just kind of, ground yourself and realize, okay, it's different. These people are different. I've got to, it kind of helps you set expectations, I think, a little bit better.
That's actually really smart. So how quickly were you able to, I guess, heal and then feel like you were at the point where you could commit to Juliana?
Well, so on our second date, I knew I could marry her, which is really weird, because she was having a hard time. She's like, you're a widower, and she was having huge issues with that.
Yeah.
And I didn't tell her that. There was no way I was telling her that on the second date. But I realized after I got home after the second date, I was like, I can totally marry her and spend the rest of my life with her.
Really?
And which didn't make a lot of sense to me, because again, I'd just been widowed 6 months. I was like, why am I feeling this way about somebody? So I knew pretty quick. And but I was really hesitant to even tell her that, because she was going on dates, but she had all kinds of issues, like, is he ready to move on? Is he really ready to open his heart? Am I just here as a placeholder or something? She has all these, and valid concerns, by the way. If you're dating a widower and have those concerns, yes, you should go slow, and you should have concerns. So I realized it pretty quick, and I realized it was really up to her to kind of make peace with things and have her be okay with it. And and we kept dating, and every date I kept thinking, okay, the euphoria for me is going to wear off, or I'm going to think that, okay, now I've seen the real Julie and I don't love her as much, and it never happened. It just never happened. I mean, the more time we spent together, the more time I wanted to spend with her. In some ways it was, I had all this empty time, and instead of trying to distract myself and think of things, I could just think about her, and I was like, oh, I'm going to see her in an hour. And so, like, one of the things we did is, and she was by far a faster runner than me. I say we had this first date. She actually went on a training run that morning.
Oh gosh,
because she's like, there's no way he's running as fast as I am. So she went on a training run that morning. It was just a short one, and then she went on a quote unquote run with me, which is probably more like, this is like a slow jog or something like that. But eventually things reached the point where we started talking more, and she's like, well, I asked her when she ran. She got up at 5 a.m. and went running every morning.
Wow.
And so, I was like, oh, it's kind of dark. Do you want someone to run with you? Like me. And so she's just kind of like, yeah, she's like, you can come run with me, but you need to know I'm training for my next marathon, and I'm not going to slow down for you. That was pretty much it.
She wasn't going to coddle you, man.
Yeah. I was like, I'm doing the typical guy thing, like, oh, that's not a big deal. I'll totally keep up with you. And for our first early morning run together, I got there right at 5, and she was ready to go. And it was like this 8-mile run. I think that at that time I had never run 8 miles before.
Oh, gosh.
And she's just like, and she kind of explained the course, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm just thinking, like, I'll keep up with her, and I did for about 2 miles. I kept up with her pretty good, and then she started pulling away, and I just kept dropping back, and it's dark. It's 5 a.m. It's still dark, and eventually it's like, I hope I know I can kind of see her, and I'm hoping, I'm just kind of following her around, and finally, I lost sight of her, and so I'm just running, hoping like I'm going the right direction, and I get back, we circle back to her apartment, and she's there waiting for me.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know how long she'd been waiting, maybe a good 15 minutes or something, but she was waiting for me, and then we just kept doing that every morning. I'd get up before 5 and get dressed real quick and run over to her place, and I'd go on these training runs with her. And it wasn't until the very end I could actually keep up with her. She never waited for me. She was just like, I'm just going, and this is the pace I'm running. See ya. She would just go.
Yeah, very good. Do you think that's also symbolic of you catching up emotionally, being able to commit? Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. It's not easy to necessarily fall in love again, because when you're a widower, you've got to take those feelings you have for your late spouse, and you've got to put them in a special place. And it's not something you just don't flip a switch and do that. It takes work. it takes time because you've got to make this new person number one. And I think it was good for me to get up before 5 every morning and drive over to her place and go running with her, because it was forcing me to make that a commitment. And every morning I could get up and do that. It was just, it just made it a little bit easier to, again, to still have love for Krista, but kind of put that in a special place, because I was really working and sacrificing to show Julie just how much that I wanted to be with her,
Mm-hmm.
And Julie will tell you now, if you were to talk to her, that she had other boyfriends and stuff that she had that would go running with her, and they drop out after a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the only person that showed, she didn't expect me to last a week. She's thinking like, okay, whatever, Abel, show up.
Mm-hmm.
I'll invite you to come, because 3 days later you're gonna be calling me up saying you aren't going. But I was there every morning. And she said I was the only person that tried to run with her that was there every morning, even though she was kicking my butt on these runs. I was there every morning ready to go running with her. And I think that also kind of showed her that I was willing to do what it took to make her number one, and that I wasn't just talking the talk, that I was going to get up and kill my legs every morning, and throw up. I can tell you how many times, when she was running so fast I would dry heave on the side of the road. I can't tell you how many times I did that, trying to keep up with her.
Wow. So sacrifice.
Yes.
Well, you were willing to go the distance.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the thing that widowers, when I talk to women who are dating widowers, because I coach them too, is they always say, well, how do I know he's in love with me? And I'll tell them, well, he'll sacrifice for you. Men don't sacrifice for women they don't love. It's easy for a guy to say, I'll take you out to a nice dinner, or we can do fun things together. But how many of those guys are actually going to sacrifice for you and put in the necessary work to show that they actually care for you? And if you can look at it that way, that's how you know really quick if a widower is ready to actually move on or not.
Interesting. I can see how that would be true. I really can. So when did you know you were finally ready to get remarried?
Julie and I had discussed it, at least getting married, quite a bit. I was really gung-ho about it, and she was like, we got to wait at least a year. She goes, if you're going to ask me to marry me, at least wait until after the year anniversary date of Chris's death. At the very least, wait. Which was, I didn't want to do it, but again, that sacrifice thing was like, fine, if that's going to make you comfortable and make you feel better about things, I'll wait. And so, Julie had finally reached a point where, again, not 100% ready for it, but mostly ready, thinking that, that this could work. So I kind of found that peace, but I had been kind of praying and just needing some peace and closure with Krista, because even though I was falling in love again and kind of moving on with my life, I really still hadn't fully forgiven myself. And I didn't know, had Krista forgiven me? I mean, I just had all these questions about forgiveness, and, was she mad at me? And there was times that I was still mad at her, where I was still angry at her. I remember it was fall because there was colorful leaves outside, and I was, cleaning up the kitchen. I was alone in the house. I just suddenly, I just had this really incredible, peaceful feeling come over me. It was just this wonderful, beautiful feeling. That was the moment where I realized that everything was cool. That wherever Krista was, things were good with her, and she wasn't mad at me. I think at that point I stopped being mad at myself, and I think at that point I realized, that God was okay with things. And just from there, I just knew that, okay, I've got it, that things are good, but I make it sound like it was just something that just happened, and it didn't. It took a lot of work to get there.
Yeah.
You're hearing the very condensed version. You're not, seeing me just as I'm driving to work or whatever, just, praying or thinking or just figuring out how am I going to do this, because I knew that I couldn't marry Julie if I was still mad at Krista. I knew that wasn't going to work. And I knew I couldn't marry Julie if I was still mad at myself. Those were things I kind of had to overcome and at least be at peace with them. Even if they weren't resolved, at least had to be at some kind of peaceful resolution with it.
Yeah.
And at that point, we had already been discussing marriage, but at that point, I felt really good about it. I felt that I could move forward and things were going to be fine, and I wouldn't feel guilty about moving forward. And I wouldn't feel, I wouldn't worry. I didn't have to worry about Krista anymore, and just things were going to be okay.
Isn't that amazing? It's truly a gift from God then, that peace that he gave you that helped you realize that it was all going to be okay, and that she forgave you and you forgave her, and we can now move on.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. What advice then do you give to widowers who are struggling at this point? You've talked about the importance of forgiving themselves and forgiving their spouse, being open to second chances, maybe keeping those communication lines open with God. What else do you tell widowers who are struggling?
So I think I would talk to widowers. One of the pieces of advice I'd give them is to have some male support. So, and that's not something that we do very, very good at. It's very different when women lose a spouse. Not only do they tend to wait till they're kind of emotionally put together before they start dating again. They have friends they have sisters, moms, best friends, whatever, that they can go to and they can talk to and they can, talk about it and do whatever it is that they need to do. Right. And with men, it isn't like you just walk up to your best friend and, man, I'm so sad, that guys don't work that way. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times too, the issue is that, the man's emotional support a lot of times is his wife, and his wife's dead. If he's had a hard day at work, he comes home and he had a crappy day at work, and or whatever, whatever's going on in his life, it's usually his wife he confides in. It's not his friends, and they may do that to some degree, but at least with a lot of the widowers I talk to, they don't really have a strong male support network. And so so something I advise them to do is like, well, are there men you can talk to? Do you have a father? Do you have a brother? Do you have somebody whatever that you go hunting with, or who are some male people in your life? And the purpose isn't necessarily to go out there and have a discussion about feelings, because that's not the way that men communicate or men do it, but men bond through shared activities. So one of the things that happened to me is soon after Krista died, is I had a friend who lived in Phoenix, Arizona, who invited me down to spend some time with him. Mm-hmm. And so I spent 3 or 4 days down there. This was in January, so about 2 months after she died. I mean, it's like 70 degrees in January. Mm-hmm. It's this is like the perfect trip. And we spent 3 or 4 days, just doing guy things. We went hiking, we went shooting, we saw some movies, some blow up movies or something like that, where things were blowing up. And, we just had, we went, he was a runner too. We went running in the morning. We just had all these kind of fun things that, that we did. And there was 20 minutes of this 3 or 4 day trip where we talked about Krista. And I told him what happened. He was the first person I actually told that I had ignored these promptings and stuff. I had never told anybody. Mm-hmm. I hadn't told anybody at that point. It was like this big, deep, dark secret. And at some point during the trip, we had this conversation and we talked. And that's all we said about it. And that is exactly what I needed. And it wasn't, it was good for him to know, and it was good for me to get it out there. But the point was, it wasn't that I talked to him for 20 minutes. It was that we spent this time just doing stuff together. And that was, I tell him now every time when it comes up, I tell him that trip saved me. That trip literally saved me, to have somebody just to go do stuff with, mm-hmm. and to feel like normal again. So I tell these widowers is there somebody, a family member or somebody that you can just spend time with? And it doesn't have to be every day for hours on end, but, is there a weekend where you guys can go camping or something like that? Or, whatever it is that you like to do. I try to figure out what it is they like to do, and you have people that like to do this with you, and can you go do it? And the point of it isn't, again, if you talk about it, it's fine, because it might come up, but the point is you're doing something where you can feel normal and have that shared activity again that you've kind of missed out on, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I guess my other advice to him is to listen to gut feelings. And this is actually for not only for widowers, but those who date them. But like with widowers, they, I've talked to them where they just say, well, I'm in this relationship and I just don't feel it's right. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. Why don't you feel it's right? And eventually, if you boil it down, it comes to, they say, well, I can't really say what's wrong with it, but I feel like it's wrong. I'm like, okay, maybe we should listen to our gut here. Maybe your gut's really trying to tell you that you shouldn't. This isn't the right relationship. Or when I'm coaching women who are with widowers, they're like, well, I feel like a replacement, or I feel like I'm competing with a ghost. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, why aren't we listening to our gut feeling here? There's a reason you're feeling that way. Mm-hmm. It's just like so. Like before Julie and I got serious, I was in a somewhat serious long distance relationship, and it never felt right. Right. The relationship never felt right. And I just thought, well, it's because I'm recently widowed. I kept making all these excuses in my head. I'm recently widowed. I'm angry at Krista. No one, she's obviously different than Krista. So how can I feel the same about somebody? And really what it was is my gut saying, this is the wrong relationship. You shouldn't be in this relationship. But I'm kind of glad I had that experience, because as soon as I was with Julie and I didn't have any of those feelings, I just kind of realized, it was a really good contrast for me. I could actually say it was actually good, because I knew that it really helped solidify that Julie was the right relationship for me. So, for widowers out there, it's like, it always comes up. They always ask, well, how do I know when you met the right person? I'm like, you just know. It's like it's like, did you have a great relationship with your wife? Yeah. How did you know she was the one? They always just say, well, I just knew. Yeah. So at some point they just knew. It's like, it's no different the second time around. You'll just know. So if your gut's telling you that this relationship is wrong, then it's wrong. So listen to it, hone that instinct, because otherwise you're just wasting time in a relationship that's not going to go anywhere. And, where you could be with somebody else, or somebody that's a better fit for you.
Wow, that's fantastic advice. Let me ask you this. In and through all of this, did you ever have a Bible verse that became especially meaningful to you?
I did. Yeah, it's John 14, 26, 27. It's peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. So I think that just speaks to me about, isn't just losing a spouse, but as we go through hard things, that we can find peace. But it's not going to be the way that the world defines peace. It's finding that inner peace, and finding that sure knowledge that you're doing the right thing, and that, that you're on the right path. And I think once you have that peace, then all those other cares and worries you have just go away.
That's beautiful. And you talked about feeling that peace. I loved one of the quotes in your book, and I have to share it. This is from Abel's book, Room for Two. He said, personal and spiritual development doesn't come when life is good and unchallenging. It's the hard times, the ones when we are forced to wake up every day and put one foot in front of the other, when the real growth occurs. I was learning that difficult times helped me appreciate the sweet ones. And if I let them, these trying moments would teach me what was truly important. So what was truly important, Abel, in the long run?
Family. My faith. That's what's important. That really is. That's really what it is right there. It's family and faith, and knowing that, I could have a second chance. That nothing else mattered.
Yeah.
It was being able to have that second chance to have a family, have that second chance with God. Having both of those things, just, I just realized that, we have lots of cares and concerns and other stuff, but it's really put things into perspective, because, when I have hard times now, all I got to do is think back, to what life was like once I lost Krista and Hope, and I realized, hey, I got through that. This is nothing compared to what I went through, and it just kind of puts everything in perspective. And as long as I have Julie and I have my I have my faith in God, then whatever, throw it at me.
No, with God, we really can get through just about anything. We gotta keep that communication line open to him. There's one other quote that I loved from your book. It said, one thing I had learned over the last months was moving on isn't forgetting about the past, but knowing when to remember it. I needed to do my best to let those who are with me know how much I love them instead of dwelling on the past. Talk to me briefly about that balance between forgetting and remembering and moving on.
Yeah, so I always tell people that you need to focus on the present and the future. That's really what you need to have most of your time and attention focused on, because if you've ever been with anyone that can't get over something that happened in the past, you just know how awful it is to be with those people. Whatever, it's a mistake they made 10 years ago, or they shouldn't have done this and that, and they just dwell on it, and it puts them like in this mental prison, right? Where everything, they can't get out of this box that they've put themselves in, because everything is defined by the past, right? A mistake that they made. So the second mistake widowers make, I talked about the first one is they date too soon, which is, fine, whatever. Go ahead and date too soon. That's okay. But the big other one is, and this is the hardest one, is they can't find a special place for the past. And so you have to realize that no one expects you to stop loving your late wife. I still love Krista, right? I always will. But there's a small special place in my heart for Krista, and a small special place for Hope. But 99.9% of my time and attention has to be focused on Julie and my kids, because that's my life now. That's chapter 2. And so, there's times where I'll go back and I can, visit that special place in my heart once in a while, and that's fine. And usually it lasts about 5 seconds, and then I'm on with my day, right? But it really is, I think the best way I heard it put is that you put your feelings for the past in a box, and you put it on the shelf, and you're in this big wonderful house, and there's that little part of the house where those feelings are. And again, once in a while you can go to the box, you can look in the box. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can't carry the box around with you. You can't talk about the box and everything like that. It's like, if you want to have a good future, if you want to have a happy life, you've got to focus on what, the blessings that you have now, and not what you've lost or the blessings that you had in the past. It's about, focusing on and making the people that are in your life now number one, and making them know that they love you, because they're not always going to be there.
Yeah.
And that's a lesson I had to learn the hard way. My last words to Krista it was a fight. And how I wish that I had said my last words to her were, "I love you." Okay, they weren't, but I can't dwell on that. I can't change that. All I can do is build a better present and a better future. And if I focus on those two things, and I'd say I have a wonderful family now. I have Julie and 7 kids. I've got wonderful opportunities. I've got books that I've published. I've done all this stuff, but I couldn't have done all these things if I was focused on what I lost all those years ago. It's really, it's making Julie know that she's number one in my heart right now, and it's doing the things to make her happy and make our marriage work. Letting my kids know how much I love them, and trying not to get too mad at them, and letting them know that, that I love them, because that's what my life is right now. It's not what happened 18 years ago. It's what's happening today.
Oh, that's fantastic advice. That's beautiful. Are there any final tips that you would like to share before we close?
Chapter 2 can be just as wonderful as chapter 1. And we all get second chances at things. It doesn't necessarily have to be relationships, whatever it is, right? We all get second chances at things, and our second chances can be just as good, if not better, than first time. So do everything you can to make this next chapter even better than the previous one.
That's beautiful. Now, Abel, you do a lot of online things. Why don't you tell us where people can find you online and how they can connect with you and your advice and find all of that?
The best way to find me is to go to my website. It's www.abelkeogh.com. That's ABELKEOGH.com. You can find links to my books there, schedule a coaching session. You can email me through the site. Everything is right there.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Abel, for being willing to share your beautiful story of hope, and for helping us realize that life can and will be better, even in chapter 2.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's show. I know that there are many of you out there that are going through a hard time, and I hope you found things that have been useful today as you listen to the podcast. If you would like to access the show notes from today's podcast, visit my website. It is storiesofhopepodcast.com. That is where you'll find favorite quotes from today's episode and shareable memes. And those are fun because you can share them with your friends on social media. You will also find the links mentioned throughout today's episode, so you don't have to remember what those were. And also all the tips that were shared. Sometimes tips are shared so much throughout an episode you forget what were those great things. So go to the show notes, storiesofhopepodcast.com, to look up these fantastic resources. If someone kept coming to mind during today's episode, Perhaps that means that you should share this with them. Maybe there was a story shared or a tip that they really, really need to hear. So go ahead and share this episode with them. May God bless you, especially if you are struggling, with hope to carry on and with the strength to keep going when things get tough. Remember to walk with Christ, and He will help bear that burden. Above all else, remember, God loves you.